He is risen from the dead, and he is Lord. Every knee shall bow, every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord.
Isaiah 56 and verses 9 through 12, we talked about that last week, so we'll use that to get a running start at what we'll talk about this morning. For the sake of our visitors who are with us, you will read that text on the screen, and it won't read like your New American Standard, New King James, whatever you typically use, and we typically use here. Made the decision at the beginning of this class to use the New Living Translation. It's a paraphrase, obviously, but a more modern language, and it has served us pretty well in our study here to kind of update that language. So if your Bible reads differently, that's why. And the headings that you'll see up there are from Don Shackelford's commentary on Isaiah. And as we said, we didn't want to just reinvent the wheel, so we're using his headings for the sake of our PowerPoint presentation. But last week, we talked about this idea of come wild animals of the field. And the point we made about that was the passages just immediately preceding that were good news passages, promising passages that we talked about things that were good for the people, that were better for the people. And as Isaiah so often does in the book, he goes from good news straight into something just the opposite of that. From praise to condemnation, from happy thoughts to very sad thoughts. And so that's what he does here. In verse 9, he makes that transition. So come wild animals of the field. And remember, he just talked about good things in the previous passage. Come wild animals of the forest. Come and devour my people, for the leaders of my people, the Lord's watchmen, his shepherd, are blind and ignorant. They are like silent watchdogs and give no warning when danger comes. They love to lie around, sleeping and dreaming. Like greedy dogs, they are never satisfied. They are ignorant shepherds. All follow their own path and intent on personal gain. Come, they say, let us get some wine and have a party. Let us all get drunk, and tomorrow we'll do it again and have an even bigger party. And again, that puts it in language that's kind of blunt and telling about what Isaiah is accusing them of, what God, through Isaiah, is accusing his people of. And you notice, who specifically is he condemning here? What's that? His people, but what specific group of his people? Verse 10, for the leaders of my people. And he takes it back to those who were in charge, whether he's talking about the priests or the government side of that. I think probably talking about both of those, but ultimately their spiritual relationship with God came down to what the priests were doing and what they were teaching. And we've said before in our study of Isaiah that the priests were not any better than the average people at this point in time, in the idolatry and things that were going on there. So, come wild animals of the field, come wild animals of the forest, come and devour my people. Why does he say it that way? Why does he use that word picture, do you think? What does that bring to your mind when you read that verse? John?
You think, like he says, that Satan is like a lion who's going back and forth waiting to deal.
John points out that he talks about Satan as like a roaring lion going about seeking whom he may devour. And so that wild animal connection there. It's about judgment, isn't it? And he uses the idea of wild animals in judgment because, well, I don't know about you, but that's kind of a scary picture, isn't it? You've been out in the woods before, and maybe you're in a deep aspen grove somewhere way up in the high mountains, and you hear something go over there in the bush that you can't see. What's the first thing that happens? Hair on the back of your neck stands up. Now, it may be a chipmunk, and probably is a chipmunk, but where does your mind automatically go? That's a mountain lion, or that's a bear, or something. or that's a two-legged enemy, or whatever the case may be. It's frightening to think about wild animals. And Isaiah, God, is calling for the wild animals to devour his people. He's calling for judgment. He's calling for destruction. Come wild animals of the field. Come wild animals. We put those at asterisks because in Leviticus chapter 26, in verse 21 through 22, then if you walk contrary to me and are not willing to obey me, I will bring on you 7 times more plagues according to your sins. I will also send wild beasts among you. Wild beasts among you, which shall rob you of your children, destroy your livestock, and make you few in number, and your highways shall be desolate. And so this is not the first time God has used the image of wild animals in talking about judgment upon his people. In Leviticus, he's talking literal wild animals. And I think in Isaiah, it's probably more of a figurative view of that. But basically the message there is, and again, I think we have to step back a little and look at it from a broader perspective. The implication there is, okay, if you walk contrary to me, I'm going to let wild animals come in. So what would the converse of that be? If you're walking according to my will, what would be the situation? That you'd be prevented, they'd be protected from that. Not to say that there weren't wild animals, but that, again, earlier in Isaiah, he talked about the fact that the cities were deserted. And what happened to the cities that were deserted? Wild animals came in and took over because there was nobody there to keep them at bay. And so this is a consistent picture, these wild animals throughout Isaiah, talking about God's judgment and how it works in a physical, literal sense, that if people aren't taken care of them, the wild animals are going to propagate to the point where they become a nuisance and a problem, and you start losing livestock, and you start, even as it says here, you start losing your children as a result of that. So the point here is, come wild animals of the forest, and devour my people. The point being, not necessarily that this is a done deal, but this is, and again, how many times have we said this in our study of Isaiah? We've got the immediate prophecy of Isaiah. Isaiah talking to these people at this point in history, what's he telling them? And yes, we've got the messianic prophecies that go way out. And we've even talked about the possibility of them, again, back to the idea of the rebuilt Jerusalem, and it talks about the stone foundations. That kind of harkens forward to Revelation. And talking about the new city, we're not making a hard connection between that, but it's similar imagery there. And so this idea of the imagery there, but the point here is, do something about this now. Fix it right now. Babylonian captivity is coming. Assyrian captivity has already happened. Judgment is coming. Come, wild animals. He's talking about it in the future. It's coming. Why not just fix it now and do what you're supposed to do? Come back to me. Be faithful. Do right. Ultimately, that was, I think, Isaiah's original intent as he prophesied to the people. And what was their response? We think we'll keep doing it the same way we've been doing it. What's that, Ellen? Yeah, let's party. Exactly. Let's use the words up there. Let's just keep on partying, and that's going to be all right. So again, this is a picture of judgment that's coming. Ezekiel prophesies from the Babylonian captivity, speaks of the plague of wild beasts in Ezekiel chapter 5 and chapter 14. And so there's a consistent message there of this idea of God's judgment and wild beasts that's used specifically in Isaiah, but also in other places of the Old Testament. The message is, you're doing wrong, judgment's coming. So it behooves you to do something about that now while there's still time. And isn't that a good message for us? If I'm involved in doing wrong, if I'm involved in something sinful, then fix that right now. Because at some point, there's going to be a price to pay for that. Elwin, you got a comment?
Yeah, it's interesting the cause of them breeding dogs because they are Absalom students. I remember one time watching a series on the dog pack. I think it was in Wyoming, Montana, somewhere like that. And they're just rampaging all over the place, killing meat sheep, this and the other. And what happened was they started messing with the wolves. And they did not have to prayer, and they ended up just working.
Yeah, that picture of wild animals, we understand that. My two little wild animal dogs that live in my house are greedy. They have two bones. They have probably, if we dug under every couch, 12,000 bones that they've buried in the house somewhere. These little bones. So Lincoln will have a bone and he's chewing on it. And there's all these other bones lying around, but which one does Violet want? That one. And Lincoln, the smart guy that he is, when she's got it and he's chewing on it, he'll bark at something. And she'll get up and go see what it is, and he'll take the bone and go chew it. So this idea of greedy, again, that's the point here. There's this greed that's going on with among these people. And it's gotten so bad that God is willing to actually send them into Babylonian captivity because of what they've done. Ezekiel 34 predicts reconciliation between God and his people and says, I will make a covenant of peace with them and cause wild beasts to cease from the land. And they will dwell safely in the wilderness and sleep in the woods. Again, that takes us back to when you're camping in Colorado. Not so bad when you're in your trailer, but when you're in your tent out there and there's that scruffling in the weeds in the middle of the night, it's a little disconcerting, isn't it? But it says there, no worries about that. Again, when the punishment's done, when you come back from Babylon and all is right, you don't have to worry about stuff like that. And Ezekiel's predicting that, saying there's going to be a covenant of peace because you have suffered the punishment I intended for you. You've come back, you've rebuilt the city, you've restored the worship of the temple. All is good. Point is, let's not even have to go down that road. Let's fix it right now, and the people obviously refuse to do that. And again, he gives the why. Here's why the judgment is coming. For the leaders of my people, the Lord's watchmen, his shepherds, are blind and ignorant, silent watchdogs who give no warning when danger comes. They love to lie around dreaming like greedy dogs, are never satisfied. They're ignorant shepherds, following on their own intent, personal gain. And we read through that before. You know what it says. It boiled down to the leaders whose focus was on what? Themselves, not God. And when my focus gets on me and not God, what happens there? Then I drift further and further from him. Because God doesn't move. God's always exactly where he's been and exactly where he will be for all of eternity. But when I get distracted by little shiny objects off out in the world, then I tend to follow those objects. And the further I follow those objects, further I get away from God. And so that's, again, what's happening with Israel. Prior to the Babylonian captivity, they are so caught up in their idolatry and their, to use that word up there, partying. It's all about me, let's eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die attitude. They're just so far away from God that they're having a hard time coming back. Steve and then Glenn.
I think one of the dangers, if you compare to present times, we could say that some people out there are evil leaders, or out for themselves, right? And they use that to their advantage. And the temptation is to become like them, to do what they're doing. And I think that's where a big problem is, because we may look up to individuals like that, but we see that they're out for themselves, so it entices us to be out for ourselves.
Yeah, Steve makes the good point that we look at religious leaders, and sometimes they're in it for themselves. Now, we don't have them like that in our today, do we? Nowhere. I say that tongue-in-cheek. But they have their own interest at heart, and so they get to that position of power so that they can use that position of power, again, for their own interests, for their own desires. And we look on at that, and sometimes we're kind of covetous about that. Look what they've got. How did they get it? Well, maybe that's what I need to do. They got it through nefarious means, but if that's what the end result is, then I might be willing to use those nefarious means to get that. And to be greedy in that. And again, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but the idea earlier in Isaiah we talked about, it's easy to look at people who are, number one, we know are living in sin, but at the same time prospering. And the conclusion I can draw from that is, God must be blessing them in that. Now that's a false assumption, isn't it? God's not blessing them in that. He's not, by giving them what they're seeking, He's not saying, okay, I approve of this. But sometimes we can think that. And sometimes we even take it further and think, wow, how much happier must that person be than I am, living on my paycheck to paycheck every week and wondering, am I going to be able to pay the house insurance this week? Am I going to be able to fix my house this week that Steve and Melanie are dealing with? And the point is, I think we understand up here is that no, just because they've got all that doesn't mean they're happy, and doesn't mean it's good, and doesn't mean it's right, because ultimately the best gauge of a relationship is not what do I have physically, but what do I have in my spiritual relationship with God. And Isaiah, I think, is saying here, if your spiritual relationship with God is right, then you don't have wild beasts roaming through the streets. You have protection. You have, what's the word there? Peace. And that's what we're all hoping for. And we try to achieve peace through physical means. And God says, if you want peace, it's got to come through spiritual means. Glenn, you were next.
Isaiah 4:6 says that my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So the leaders are responsible for destroying the individuals. We as individuals are responsible for knowledge as well.
Sure, that very famous passage in Hosea 4 says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And again, it says up there they're blind and what? Ignorant. And ignorant simply means uninformed, lack of knowledge, and all that goes with that. And so not knowing the Word makes it hard to keep the Word. And that's, again, part of what's being said there, which again, back to the leaders, maybe they're not teaching it. And certainly the people aren't. Deuteronomy 6 says you teach it to your children when you're sitting, when you're standing, when you're walking by the way, you write them on the doorpost of your house, all of that. And obviously that's not going on because the people have no clue what they're supposed to be doing. Elwin, you were next.
Yeah, it makes me think of lay up the treasures in heaven, not on this earth. That's one of the first things that I look at when I'm motivated to do something, is what am I trying to achieve? Am I trying to achieve more treasures on this earth? Or am I trying to lay things up in heaven? It's funny when you talk to people and you say, okay, give me a list of everything that's important to you. They'll say, well, I need a house, I need like 2 cars, I need insurance, I need this, I need that. And then you say, well, where are these treasures located? Now, where do you have the treasures in heaven? And it's an easy evaluation to do, and anyone can do it. But it really points out where your heart is set. Set on this world, you got a problem.
Elwin points out it's a heart problem. It's about where our heart is. And again, is there anything wrong with having a house and cars, clothes? No. Unless those things are my God, are my end result I want out of life, then yeah, that's a problem. But if my focus is on God, and when we talk about this idea of priorities, and this is my personal opinion, we can set all sorts of priorities, 1 through 5,000 on our priority list. That's an exercise, in my opinion, in futility. Set priority number 1, love the Lord and keep His commandments. Everything else take care of itself, if that's how I'm living. And that's just something to think about. Flo.
When we suffer, don't have another Christian. The error is when we start questioning why God does something. That's our error.
Flo makes a good point that the problem with that is I look at people who are prospering and know they're doing evil, and I'm assuming that God is blessing them for that. And that's not an assumption I should make. Not an assumption I should make. And yet we tend to do that. Because isn't making that assumption a little bit of, God, I'm blaming you for that? Not so much I'm blaming you for what they've got, but I'm blaming you for what I don't have. And it's subtle, maybe, but we need to be mindful of that God, well, he said it's going to rain on the just and the unjust. But over and over in Scripture, he says, I'm going to bless my people. And it's not always with gold bars that he blesses me. He blesses me in so many ways that have no monetary figure whatsoever, but have a peacemaking component in my life, that I have peace that I can enjoy. And that's worth more than anything money can buy. Steve?
You know, one thing we got to remember too is that when Jesus was tempted by the devil, he was promising him all these riches and the glory of the kingdoms and so many different things if Jesus would worship him. And so when we put that into our personal lives, you know, we understand that, okay, all these riches, all this glory that we can have may not actually be coming from God, you know, and that it may not actually be a blessing to have all the things of this earth.
It may not be a blessing to have all the things that we think we want on this earth. It may just not be. So again, basic message, do right, you'll have peace. Do wrong, when you hear that scratching out in the woods, you better run because it's going to be a wild animal. That's kind of the whole message that he's saying. He's saying here, and it's all about our attitude in our relationship with God. And if my attitude's focused on me, I'm in trouble. If it's focused on God, then I can have peace. Let's all get drunk. What sorrow for those, and this is earlier on in Isaiah, what sorrow for those who get up early in the morning looking for a drink of alcohol and spend long evenings drinking wine, making themselves flaming drunk. And again, I like the way New Living Translation puts that, flaming drunk. Isaiah and he's using that as an illustration, although there's probably some relevant realism to that. But the point is, the focus is on something else other than God. And that something else is supposed to make me happy, and ultimately, if that's their lifestyle, you know they're not happy. Can't be happy that way. What sorrow awaits the proud city of Samaria, the glorious crown of the drunks of Israel. He said that back in Isaiah chapter 28, verse 1 and verse 3. And so this, again, a continuing theme that Isaiah has pointed out, the idea of being drunk as part of their disobedience to God, or a sign of their disobedience to God, or a word picture of their disobedience to God. Israel is led by drunks who reel with wine and stagger with alcohol, Isaiah chapter 28 and verse 7. And so on that theme goes. All right, thoughts, comments on any of that before we jump into chapter 57? Anything else? All right. Good people pass away. And kind of a cross-reference there to some of the translations we're more familiar with. King James, New King James, New American Standard, English Standard, most of the more conservative traditional translations that you will probably carry in your lap have the word perish there. But the idea of pass away, of death, is part of that idea, whether it's natural death or whether it's a forced death or whatever the case may be. Good people pass away. The godly often die. And again, those other verses say are taken away before their time. No one seems to care or wonder why. No one seems to understand that God is protecting them from the evil to come. For those who follow godly paths will rest in peace when they die. Good people pass away. Is that true? Yeah. How many good people have we lost in this congregation just in the 20 years I've been here? Just gone on to their reward. Time, it's appointed for man to die. The Bible says that. 70 years, by strength of will, 80 years, the psalmist says, and then we're gone. But sometimes that happens way earlier than that. And we talk about the idea of a young person dies and they die way before their time. And I understand that sentiment, but Isaiah is kind of saying here, and feel free to disagree if you think I'm not saying this correctly. Sometimes good people pass away, the godly often die, and it says taken away before their time, but was it before their time? That's the kind of the message here, and we'll talk about that a little bit, because I'm looking at it from my perspective. I'm looking at a young person dying, and that's hard, that's tragic, that's hard on families, it's hard on people, and from our emotional response, we can't help but think that. And there's nothing wrong with thinking that, I don't think. If we lose somebody, that's hard, and we deal with the grief and all of that. That's part of the message. But Isaiah's got a reason he's saying all of this. But good people pass away, the godly often die before their time. Glenn?
Kind of reminds you of what took place in Texas.
Okay, yeah, sure. You got this whole camp of kids. Man, what must that be like? I pray I never find out. And I pray you don't either. But those people know what that's like. And it's terrible. And then the phrase there, but no one seems to care or wonder why. And maybe the point that Isaiah is making here isn't so much that they don't care. Maybe that is what he's saying. But they don't wonder why, is the phrase that kind of stands out for me. They don't wonder why. Is there something bigger involved in this than just my own personal feelings about it? And the answer is yes. There's always something bigger. Jim?
In the New King James Version it says, while no one considers that the righteous is taken away from evil.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
actually it's a good place to be going.
Yeah, because it goes on to say, well, let me get the right button here. No one seems to understand that God is protecting them from the evil to come. So, go ahead, Cindy. All right, Cindy's question is, she's heard this phrase used at funerals, said of her brother specifically, and of the Columbine shooting that we had so many years ago up there. And so the question is this applicable to us, or is he talking just to these people in Isaiah's day? Or I guess the question we're asking is, what's our takeaway from this particular concept that we need to look at in our own lives today? How do we look at this? The floor is open for your intuitive comments.
When I lost my son 2 years ago, it's the same. He was 36 years old with multiple sclerosis. And that phrase right there really hit me because, in my opinion, what he was going to go through, and I've seen my sister also pass from the same disease. It was a nightmare. It was a horrible thing to experience. When your brain is perfectly normal, you can't control it. You step on the gas pedal, you can't go. He was going from cage to wheelchair. And I actually prayed, I said, God, please take him. Because the things that he's going to go through, I wouldn't understand. So I mean, that gets me in a place where, yes, I agree with that 100%.
So Elwin, this speaks to him in relating to his brother who had a debilitating disease and nothing was going to get better, and Elwin was able to find comfort in the fact that he was no longer suffering, even though he was gone before his time. And all right, Glenn?
Paraphrasing, Paul said, I'd like to go on, but it's better if I stay here and after you.
Yeah, Paul said, I'd like to go on, but there's work still here to be done, so I'll stay and do that if that's what the Lord wills. All right? Other thoughts or comments? Sherry?
Well, and it's funny because I wouldn't have been able to tell you exactly the verse and stuff, but I've often thought that maybe it was my way of dealing with tragedies, driving young is that, we just don't know what they were going to face later down the road. And, at least now we know during this age, they are protected. They are going to be with God. And, whether it was a family home or just things that we had no, but it also shows us that, God is seeing down the road. He knows. He's still in control, and we just have to trust that. Just kind of on that, and I don't know if anyone's heard, one of the 13-year-old girls that survived the camp, the song Hallelujah, and it's very popular. She rewrote the entire words, and it's just, if you look at any of the video clips of the group of girls who survived, they're singing praises, they're praising God, they know even in this tragedy, we're not going to forget them, that we're not going to turn away from our faith either, so it's just very inspiring to see,
Yeah, it's, again, granted, we were talking about a very difficult subject here, the loss of somebody we love and care about, and we don't want to diminish that in any way. When a loved one dies, that hurts, and it hurts in ways that even stuff on the news that we see doesn't hurt, because it's personal, so we understand that. But there's this mindset, again, of God, well, I'll just throw this out there and you feel free to respond. God looked down and saw this person, said, I think it's his time to die. Boom. And then he's looked, well, it's your time now, and it's your time now, and boom, boom, boom. He's got this all planned out that he's doing it this way. Is that the picture that you see when you talk about God?
It seems possible.
Okay.
There's a plan for every one of us. I think there's a pathway.
Yes. And go ahead.
I was just going to say that it seems like here the big point of what he's saying is good people got nothing to worry about. They've done their thing, and verse 2 is everybody goes, okay, great. You folks, on the other hand, who've been doing bad stuff, you got a problem. He goes, further on, I'm sorry, I'm going ahead.
No,
You all got a problem. These folks, it's no big deal because they've done the right things and they've gone to their reward. Your reward is going to be something different than what you would want.
yeah, John's hit on the point of this whole verse, I think, of what he's saying. He's not giving us theological information about why people die and at what point and what the time frame is and who literally pulls the trigger on that. He's not talking about that, but he's talking about the fact that, okay, if a good person dies before their time in unexpected ways, and I don't want to be glib about this, but they're going to heaven. They're going to heaven, and they're taken care of. So but John points out, he's talking to these other people, if you're away from God, then yeah, you better be worried about that. Because the end result for you is going to be much different. So which group would you rather be in? In the group where I'm following God, and yes, my life may end early. I might come in some unexpected way that it's just over and gone. But if I'm with God, that is not a tragic story. That's not a tragic ending. That's just a new beginning, a better beginning. And again, I understand that if we lose loved ones here, it's hard to see that at that point, okay? So we're not going to diminish the grief and the pain that goes along with that. But all of us are here this morning because we want to die and go to heaven, and we think that's a good thing. And we have to really think that's a good thing, especially in times when there's death, that we understand that and we believe that. Because that's, I think, what he's saying here. They rest in peace when they die. And that's what we've got to keep in mind. If you're not living according to my will, though, that's a different story, which is why Isaiah is saying to them, you need to straighten up, you need to repent, you need to do something better. Penny.
I understand everything that we're talking about as far as the righteous die, and they rest in peace once they die. But why up there does it say that no one seems to care when you die? Why is it saying, why is it pointing?
Yeah. Jim, yeah, let's read it. Jim, would you read that again from New King James, that verse 1? I think the New King James does a better job of translating that.
The righteous perishes, and no man takes it to heart. Merciful men are taken away, while no one considers that the righteous is taken away from evil.
No one considers that the righteous are taken away from evil. And again, back to Cindy's comment or question. The immediate context of this is Isaiah and his people in the day that he's presenting that, in light of what they're doing there and what's coming again with the Babylonian captivity. We've got to keep it in context always. If we take it out of context, we've lost the thread. Is there an application from that? Yes. And that application is the same, in the sense the same. We're not facing Babylonian captivity that we know about. We may not be facing imminent death that we know about. But Kevin has to have the mindset that if I'm living faithfully according to his will, that by my obedience to the gospel and by the grace of God, there's a better thing waiting for me. And isn't that ultimately the message of what that I can take from Isaiah here for me? Again, slightly different for those people because they were facing imminent. What did we say about from the time Isaiah prophesied about Cyrus? It would be at least 200 years before that would actually come to pass. But it was that's a lot more imminent and immediate future for them than to push it way out to thousands of years in the future. Live for God. O death, where is your sting? Paul says that, doesn't he? That's what this is talking about, isn't it? The sting of death is removed by being faithful to God and knowing the peace that we're going to have because of that faithfulness. Now, when I say the sting is gone, it doesn't mean it's not going to hurt for us when we lose a loved one. One of the few times Jesus wept was when Lazarus died. And it's a mind-boggling thought that goes through my mind. I think he knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, and yet he was still weeping. Why? Because he saw the pain in the people that were there. They were distraught. And so we understand that when people die, we're distraught. But the message here is there should be, even in that ultimate peace of knowing that they are with the Lord. And again, it's better to be with the Lord. Always better to be with the Lord. And that's what I'm working toward. That's what we're all working toward. And Isaiah is saying to these people, that's what you ought to be working toward. To be able to be with the Lord in peace. All right? Appreciate your presence this morning and all your good comments. Thank you.